Because that
it's most exciting.
Not only will it keep you awake after lunch, it'll keep you awake most nights too. It seems to be a never-ending litany of new things coming down from the state regarding how you're going to handle your employees. So this afternoon we've got a tag team with Joe McKea, HR Director with Uinta County, and Brandy Grace from UAC. Your new HR assistant there, HR representative, to talk about some of the new federal and state mandates and issues that you're all trying to deal with from an HR standpoint. So with that, Joe.
Okay, thanks, John. All right. I don't like hearing my voice on the speaker, but I was forced, required, voluntold to wear the mic. There are a couple different regulations that we want to talk about. Number one is hopefully everyone has had a chance to look into the new FLSA regulations, Fair Labor Standards Act, and how it applies to exempt, i.e. salaried employees. So kind of what I wanted to do is touch that really briefly. And then we'll go into more on the code that is the new state code that has come out. So first, just kind of by a show of hands, does anybody, I don't like to do it this way, so close your eyes and don't look around at everybody else, but by a show of hands, how many of you don't know what I'm talking about when I say new 2016 FLSA regulations? Okay, we have a few. So briefly, there were some changes made to the Fair Labor Standards Act, and this is on the federal level, so it applies to everyone working in the nation, every business, that they increased the minimum salary requirements, the minimum weekly requirement from $455 a week to $900 and some odd dollars, which equates to about $50,000 a year. So if you have employees that you had considered prior salaried employees or FLSA exempt employees, then you need to figure out by September 1st? December 1st, where you need to figure out if you're going to change them to hourly employees, or you got to be creative on how to do that. So the minimum requirement was $20,000. It's going to affect mostly a lot of your retail and fast food businesses and those, because they work their managers like dogs, right? And they have them work 50, 60, 70 hours a week, and they pay them their weekly salary, and that weekly salary will double. Now, what that does, when I say exempt, what I mean is what the law says is exempt from overtime. So that's basically what the exemption is for. So if you're paying a salaried employee $455 a week, now in December it's going to go to $913 a week, $913 a week, then you don't have to pay them overtime for hours they work over 40. So there are different workarounds, different ways that you can do this, and luckily they did not make a change. They were talking about making a change in what they call the duties requirement, which means that if you're doing management duties as well as employee duties, which there's a pretty good distinction between those two, then if they're doing a certain percentage of employee duties, then you can't consider them managers. They were going to raise that level, which would have made it even more challenging to have exempt employees. So there are some entities, some counties, I've talked to other folks in my line, and what they have done, everybody's kind of tackled it differently. At Uinta County, we had only one position actually that fell right in there about that $50,000 wage, and we basically just took that position. We still considered it a professional position, as a librarian, and we had 4 individuals in that. We basically just made them hourly and told them not to work more than 40 hours a week. Okay, so you can do that. Most government entities can do that because they typically just have their employees work 40 hours a week anyway. So for us, that's kind of good for public agencies, because we kind of have that standard of not working our folks more than 40 hours a week without paying overtime. There are other counties I do know that have, there's one in particular, they put all of their employees on hourly rate so that they will never have this problem as far as the overtime rule goes. There's some pros and cons to that, because if you for some reason have to work more than the 40, then you have to pay them overtime. So there's some different things that you can do. Those of you who have had to make changes, other HR folks in here, do you want to share what your county has done if you've had to do and make any changes? Is there anything you've done?
We just have one too, and I mean, I haven't got it approved or anything, but I think it would be more feasible for us to change that one person's salary.
Change the salary.
She's close enough to that level, and I know she works lots.
And she works a ton. So it would be better to keep a person like that works a lot of hours to keep them salaried if feasible. Very good. Anything else? Has anyone done anything different? Johnny?
One county that's not represented here found that they had a position that fell into this category. That was their EMS people. And so to deal with the issue, they just took all the EMS people and created an interlocal entity and made them employees of the interlocal.
So they created a separate agency so they didn't have to deal with it.
Yes.
That's like the defer the risk, right?
Yeah.
Very good. They must have been to one of these trainings. Very good. They transferred the risk. So there are different options. If you're concerned about it, if you have employees, I know a lot of folks in here aren't, your HR people, but if you have any concerns, go to your HR people and try to find out, what you can do to make this work in your agency, because you don't want to be caught on the wrong side of an FLSA claim. That's for sure, because it deals with back pay and all sorts of stuff, and there's a 3-year look-back period if it's a willful violation. So make sure you don't get caught 3 years down the road on this. Any questions on that, how that works? That's basically in a nutshell what it is. There's a little bit more to it, but it's not really huge, it's not really in depth. So, very good. Kind of the meat of the program today is we're going to talk about line of duty death benefits for law enforcement. And everyone should have in front of them an anonymous automated response card, AARC. What I'm going to do is call it a clicker. Okay, it's a little bit easier. So does everybody have one of these sitting in front of them? Okay. It is just that. It's anonymous, so you can answer these questions and not feel like...
Yeah, that's what they tell us about elections, too.
But I am keeping track. Maybe I should have Steve run this program. So, okay. What is it? I had a hard time kind of making this thing. Yeah, it's not that one. And it's not that one. We're done. Yeah, we'll just go with one. That's okay. I have to reset the slides because I had to test it and I didn't want to have all the answers in there. So, in your handouts, this actually says LODD benefits explained question or explanation point and question mark. There are some explanations that I want to give, as well as bring about some questions that we have about these death benefits. And I certainly want to get your opinions and your thoughts on the details of this. And I'm not in any way, shape, or form trying to minimize what our law enforcement does for us. And I'm not going to get into details on. I'm not really lobbying for anything. We're just thinking that I kind of drew a short straw, I think. And that's because because Uinta County is one of the few agencies that had big impact with this code. So what I want to do is have you answer these questions. You see this green light here pulling open, and responses. I should get around 25. Okay, and you just touch the number that corresponds with the number that is of the option that is up there. This is really easy. You'll see a little light that's above the 1/A button. When you push it, it should do a green flash or a yellowish flash. If it does a red flash, I'll have to give you a new card because it means it's not working. So what I want you to do, as some people have already done without even following directions.
But you don't know who we are.
I know who you are. You're still going. Is choose one of these that corresponds to what you think it is. And if you push it multiple times, it'll still only register once. So don't try to vote more than once. Vote early, vote often, right, Steve? And if you choose a different one, it'll take your last selection. So if you go 1, oh no, just kidding, 2, it'll take 2. All right, so in which legislative...
Is that a problem?
Sorry?
I voted G, is that a problem?
That would not count. So, okay, so most of you have read that question. In what legislative session was 5317 codified? We got just about everybody. If you want to all push yours one more time, it'll make sure. I think we're there. Okay. So about half of us chose 2015. The next one was 2016. And 7% 2014, and the rest of you have no clue. Just kidding. So, right answer. The majority of the others were right. 2015 was the actual year that 5317 was codified. Okay, so what is 5317? So basically what this is it's legislation through our state that actually guarantees continued health insurance benefits for surviving spouses and dependents of law enforcement and firefighters. So that's what the actual law is. There's some intricacies to it and whatnot. We'll talk about some of those. Applies to all public entities with LEOs and firefighters. By a raise of hands, how many of you do not have LEOs and firefighters on your payroll? I know some of you don't because probably health departments. Yeah, some of you don't deal with this directly. So yeah, there are several. But if you have LEOs and firefighters on your payroll, then this applies to you. So you have two options, basically, what the legislature said. You can pay 100% of the health benefit premium for the surviving spouse and for the dependents in a line of duty death, or you can join a trust fund. Okay, so there's two different things. You can pay what your 100% premium, what your health insurance costs. How many of you know how much that is in your mind? How much the 100% cost is for your employees? Not their portion, but you know. Or you can join this trust fund. We'll explain that a little bit more in detail. So I wanted to show you this clip because I think it kind of applies to what we're talking about.
It's like Aladdin and his magic lamp.
You don't believe that, huh?
Aladdin's lamp?
Did you ever see that lamp?
What?
Did you ever see that lamp?
No.
If you never saw that lamp, then don't talk.
What do you mean? You're going to stand right there in front of me, a grown man able to read and drive a car and have dates and everything, and tell me that you believe there was such a thing as Aladdin's magic lamp that you could rub in a genie and come out of it and do things for you?
I never saw that lamp. I do not know what spirit was evoked by that lamp, and therefore I cannot discuss the subject intelligently. Another thing is atmosphere.
Atmosphere.
Aladdin's lamp was rubbed over in Arabia. Now, the atmosphere in Arabia is a little bit different than the atmosphere atmosphere here in the southeastern United States. And so, because I am not familiar with the atmosphere, and never having seen the land, I cannot discuss the subject of television. Did you ever see the land? No.
Why are you suddenly so interested in all this stuff?
So anyway, we're talking about magic lamps, I think, a little bit with this with this House bill. So the House bill that was brought about in 2016 and was put in there, it changed some things of what had happened in 2015. So 2015, it was supposed to start. The line of duty death benefits were supposed to start if a law enforcement officer or firefighter passed that point forward as of 2015 legislative session on. House Bill 159 changed the code to put a look-back period into July 1st, 2005. So it went back 10 years. So, okay, if you had a line of duty death that happened 10 years ago, then you pay 100% of the premium for the surviving spouse and dependents, or, oh, by the way, you can't join the trust fund. So there's some issues with that. And then it also repealed, which I thought was kind of a good portion of the bill when it was originally written, discontinued benefit when the surviving spouse remarries. So technically what happens is that the spouse stays on the insurance, and when that spouse remarries, what do we do with the new spouse? You know, do we put the new person on the plan? How do we handle that? So that's kind of a challenge for us that are dealing with enrollments and whatnot with insurance companies, that it's challenging for us to decide how we're going to go forward with that. And so what they did also is they clarified this trust fund participation a little bit for us. And I'm going to show you, sorry, this is a scanned copy of a letter. But basically this is setting up the trust fund, and it talks about how it's going to work and the committee and all that stuff and how it's put together. And kind of this is bottom line right here is it's going to cost you between $87 and $132. That's what we estimate based on our actuarial numbers, how much this is going to cost an agency per law enforcement, per law enforcement person, per firefighter, per year. So think about in your brain how many law enforcement firefighters you have in your agencies, multiply it by that, and that's your yearly amount to go into this trust fund. But that's an estimate. They don't know yet how this is all going to play out, because this is the first year at it. And then it talks about how payment's going to be collected and all that. As that goes. So,
But they still haven't come out and told us how much or...
we don't. Has anybody joined the trust fund yet? No?
Okay.
We can. Cards are back.
Yeah. Okay, new one. Does your agency pay 100% of current employees' medical insurance premium? I just want to know that. Okay, good to know for this group. Again, if you don't think it registered, you can push the button again. I saw 30 the last time. Everybody push it again. Okay, there you go. Thanks, Corey. That's an interesting number. So more than half of us pay, half of our agencies, how our employees pay a portion of the medical insurance premium. So that kind of begs the question then, why do we pay 100% of the premium for surviving spouse and dependent that isn't currently an employee, currently working? So that's kind of a good question to be asked. Okay, so when we did address this, oh, my thing's annoying. When can an agency terminate the continued health plan for the surviving spouse? A, after 5 years of coverage. B, when the surviving spouse would have been eligible for pension, or sorry, when the employee would have been eligible for pension benefits, so through up to retirement. When Social Security, when surviving spouse is Medicare eligible, or never, or we just continue it on. Good question. When do we end the surviving spouse health insurance benefits? Everybody push it one more time.
Yeah, I remember when I pushed last week.
Okay, we'll go with 29. Okay. When surviving spouse is Medicare eligible is the winner, and you are correct. So, depending on when the employee began, employment with the agency, this could be some time.
Like 40 years or something.
Could be quite some time. And then dependents, so kids, go till they're age 26, because that's the whole voluntary thing, right? They're eligible for insurance until they're 26. And there's not really a provision requiring the dependents to enroll in other coverage if available. So that's kind of one of the things that we should think about, when we're thinking about how much of the liability or risk this could pose to an agency, is that could be add up to some chunk of change. And I hate to say it this way, but why not kick them off if they're eligible for some other plan that's going to come? Potential fiscal impact. So think about number of employees, number of LEOs or firefighters that you have at your agency. Multiply that by either 87 or 132 or somewhere in between, or probably even more. Who knows? And where do you think it would fit? I'll give you some time on this one because it's going to take some really intricate math. At least for an HR person. All we know how to do is add. And that's what the calculator.
That's not what this was.
Is that 130, is that, Joe?
What's
Is
that?
that 130 a month or 130 a year?
130 a year per person. A year per person. And consider also, think about how old, your average age of your LEOs and firefighters, and how long it's going to be before they get that Medicare eligibility and when their dependents.
If we don't have any, do you want us to still vote? Because will that secure?
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay.
Just what you think it would be.
If I happen to have one?
Yeah, if you happen to have them. I'm going with 25. So most of us are thinking that's going to be 300,000 plus. And the others, anyone insignificant in a second. So it depends. So of course, the surviving spouse is until they're Medicare eligible, and depends until age 26. Let me give you an example. Okay, this is surviving spouse, 42 years old, with a 13-year-old dependent and a 16-year-old dependent. Actually, I changed that one. That was my other presentation. I put in 4 kids on this one instead of just 2, so don't think of that first one. There's 4 kids, 1
Because
to
you're
12.
HR, you can't do math?
Well, no, it's because I can't figure out technology. I have like 4 presentations and I can't figure out which one it is. My latest. So 12-year-old, 15-year-old, 19-year-old, 22-year-old. This is just an example. Family annual premium, this is what the total cost is $19,200. A 2-party. So once this kid drops off in 4 years, once these 3 kids drop off after several years, it'll go to 14,400, and then single for just the surviving spouse goes to 8,400 a year. Listed those out. So we're looking at about $500,000, and that is assuming a 6% renewal. How many of you have a lower than 20% renewal in health insurance? You're lucky if you have lower than 20%. We've been very fortunate the last 2 years. By being self-funded, we've been able to adjust the plan a little bit so that it's not, the renewal rate isn't so much. But that's kind of unheard of, really, is about 6%. So it can add up. And this is an example of one deputy. So, so now let's think about the trust fund. So if you decide to not put your neck on the line to pay the money for the health insurance premiums, let's think about if you were to put money, give money to the state to put into the trust fund, how much it would cost per year. So this one's going to be a little easier. It's taking law enforcement times somewhere between 87 and 132, which is the number they've given us. And of course, it's going to depend on the agency based on how many employees you have in that category. So most people are saying it's going to be about 10,000, and that's true. Depending on where you're at, how many employees you have. That's what I figured it would be for you and the county anyway, using over $10,000 per year to have that insurance through the trust fund. So the thing is I don't want to focus just on money, because it's not just all about the money. It's kind of confusing because there aren't really many provisions in the code that talk about the enrollments and the terminations. So it doesn't really say, as I said before with dependents, what if a dependent gets married? What if a surviving spouse gets remarried and is eligible for another group plan? Should that be a reason or at least a thought as to why this person should no longer be on health insurance through the county or the agency? I do say agency because this also applies to cities and towns as well. So it's an agency. And so it's kind of hard we don't have any direction. That's the hard part. We don't have this is the way it's supposed to be. Except for where they repealed the one where it said that the dependents have to be taken off. So I don't know. It's kind of challenging. Also, it makes it a struggle for those who aren't self-funded. Well, even the ones that are self-funded, it's hard to have a group insurance plan, not identifying who you're covering as part of the group. Most insurance plans will say employees that work more than 30 hours a week are considered full-time employees, therefore they're eligible for group health insurance. Well, we've no longer restricted the group to employees by allowing surviving spouse and dependents to be on the plan. So are we then in violation of our own plan? So it's a little kind of nebulous. It's kind of hard to say. And then you have all sorts of COBRA issues. We had a line of duty death, and we actually ended up paying the COBRA premium for that surviving spouse for the 3 years that they're eligible for COBRA if their spouse passes. So you have issues with COBRA. You also have issues with other payouts. And that's why it's kind of hard to do, in my mind, it's hard to do this blanket rule for all agencies because we're all different. We're similar, but we're all different in a way. Uinta County was, I'm going to say, fairly generous monetarily when our unfortunate death happened in 2006. But that doesn't matter. So if your county decides, if your entity decides to, help out a little bit financially, doesn't matter, you're still stuck to this. Also, I do need to mention that workers' comp benefit, and John, you may be able to help me with this. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but workers' comp benefit, it does pay a surviving spouse a pretty good sum of money at the time of death, as well as a weekly benefit for, is it 6 years? I think it's 6 years.
I think that's
They pay him a weekly benefit. And so it's not like that spouse is getting absolutely nothing. They're getting that workers' comp benefit, as you and I would if we were to die in the line of duty, die of a work-related injury. So there are some other things that need to be considered that I don't think the legislature considered. URS, we're all covered under URS as well for a full-time government employee. And URS also doesn't have, Corey, you probably explain how that goes. I don't know that one very much. It's annual, 1 year salary or something like that?
No, it's different if it's, you've got a retirement they can collect if they've got so many years.
Depending on how many years of service they have.
Stuff. But they do have a one-time death benefit also. So anyone that's tier 2, it's 75% of your highest annual salary in a one-time check.
Okay. So it's a one-time plus if they're eligible for certain, they can do some pension.
Yeah.
So it truly depends. It depends on where the employee is in their career, it seems, with the URS benefit anyway. So there are some other things out there. I'm not so sure that the legislature looked at and if they had or not.
Okay, so I'm looking at this, and I'm the road department guy, and I'm seeing one of my guys out on the highway getting hit and killed. He ain't eligible for this.
Right.
So that's unfair. So what's keeping his family from suing the state for the same thing that they're allowing law enforcement and fire to have?
Correct, and that's a very good point, and that's one of the things that we have brought up to, well, we will be bringing up to the legislature. We brought up to the committee that's put this together is, okay, you have to understand that if you're going to do this carve-out policy, that you may be getting lobbied by other groups, road department, any other group, any other agency that might feel like their particular group also should receive some sort of compensation too.
Well,
So
and
it's,
they get a huge, law enforcement gets a huge payout, well, not huge, but a large sum from the Justice Department, federal.
if you sign up for it, each agency has the opportunity to sign up for that coverage.
Because when we lost our deputy, it was, I think, 316 grand.
They got that.
Yeah.
See, ours did not, and we just were not part of that.
We got
And
that.
I don't know if that's a trust or how that's all set up because we don't
Either,
participate.
but it was through the Federal Justice Department.
So there are some other tools. In fact, it's interesting, there was an ad I heard on the radio the other day that talked about they were trying to sell term life insurance, and they said, on average, a person should have at least 7 times their annual salary. You should be covered at least 7 times your annual salary. So that's for us to think about also. I think that's a little excessive because it was an insurance ad, right? So they're going to, of course, inflate that. But, something for everyone to think about as far as, how you're going to take care of your family, especially if you're the sole provider. That's certainly why we do insurance. So anyway, yeah, that's one of the good points that we have thought about bringing to the committee to talk about with the legislature as well.
I was going to say that almost sounds like they say don't go to a sausage factory or vote the legislature because you don't want to see how things are made. And I wonder if it's a question of giving them the full picture, incorporating, the COBRA, the federal benefit, and all that, so that you can take a holistic look
So
at
you
it.
can see everything.
Yeah, so you don't have unintended consequences, by a road department or something. I think it's worth it. I think it's also worth analyzing how it falls for public safety.
It's challenging because, especially in our environment we're in right now, we've seen a lot of recent attacks on law enforcement and some deaths in Dallas and different places. So we're not trying to minimize that because that certainly is, they're out there, protecting our our communities and trying to keep us safe. And you know, the thing is that by doing something like this, it seems as though, and this is in my own opinion, it seems as though the legislature is putting a price tag on that person's life, but yet they're not considering other people's lives that are not maybe comparable but similar. And it's hard to do because you can't say a life is worth this much, whether it's work-related death or
Well, but we do exactly that with life insurance. I mean,
yeah, they do their actuaries. And
right. You know, what is you go 7 to 10 years of your salary. You have kids and all of it. I mean, it's.
Well, and URS calculates it too when they figure how long they expect us to survive after we retire. That's how they figure how much we contribute to the retirement program. So.
Well, I think it's great that you're working with them because, like I say, I hate to have them make legislation based on incomplete or faulty data.
Very good. Thank you, John.
Joe, do you know this trust fund, how that's structured? Is that are they going to pay benefits as a trust fund?
I don't know. I don't know what their plan is going to be.
Are they working with PEHP?
I don't know what insurer they're going to use. I don't know what plan they're planning on designing. That's another challenge is because all of us have so many different types of plans. You know, we have a traditional health plan as well as a high deductible health plan. So are they going to allow options?
Wasn't there language in there too that you can't change the plan from what it was on the date of death?
No, you treat the surviving spouse as though they're an employee.
As though they're an employee.
So I think the difference is that for a surviving spouse, where you say next year as a county you decide that you're going to charge the employee a percentage of the premium, the code specifically says that you'll provide that benefit at 100% of the cost. So that would be the difference. Other than that, they would be treated like an employee and eligible for the benefits. You just have to pay 100% of the premium. But the trust that's been established has representatives. There's one from Utah Association of Counties. Our representative is Commissioner James Ebert from Weber County. Joe and I have met with him. We'll continue to have conversations with him because we certainly want to provide input. But as of right now, they really haven't determined. They're looking at that rate. They've assured us that it will be between that 82 and 100, 87 and 132. It'll be within that range, but we still don't know what the actual number is yet.
To start with.
But the thing to remember is if you want to participate in the trust, you need to be thinking about that for your budget year that's coming right up because that needs to be paid by June 30th, 2017 in order to have coverage going forward, and then it will be an annual commitment.
That's a great segue to my next slide. So that's a decision that you need to make, and you need to make it pretty quick because you can't wait until there's a line of duty death to decide if you want to keep it in the trust. And that was one of the issues that we, as well as 7 or 8 other agencies, had issues with, is because they did the look back on the death, but they didn't do the look back on if we could participate in the trust or not. So that was kind of a challenge there as well for us to make that decision. But yeah, if you want to make sure, if you want to enter into this trust agreement, then we've got to act pretty quick.
So, Joe, I'm sorry, for those of us that are in this situation, are you saying we could join the trust going forward except for the one we've had, right?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify. We couldn't take care of the one that's already happened in the trust, okay.
So we signed ours up on health insurance a couple months ago, right after this came out, because she was the one that kind of lobbied on it. I mean, she's been tracking it really close. So she came after they said yes, she came in and we signed her up.
The question I have has to do with the road department, like you were saying. So I have road department employees who do fire breaks on fires. They're acting as a firefighter, they're certified to be a firefighter, but they're a public employee. So how does that play into?
My understanding is it's only for full-time benefited people.
But they're acting in a fire capacity. So it's tricky.
But you don't pay them as a firefighter, though, do you?
No, but I pay them their full-time benefited
Road department or whatever. Yeah. I don't. In that case, I'm not sure. I don't think it applies.
I totally see what you're saying.
Yeah,
When I was in Miller
it
County,
makes
we had the
sense.
same
There could be a
thing where
loophole there because URS will treat a voluntary firefighter that dies in line of duty as though they were a full-time firefighter. So if they're saying that URS says this, then why doesn't this apply?
That's the genie part, is there's so many questions about this thing that we just don't know.
I'm with Johnny though. I think that when you guys meet with them, you need to bring up how are they going to fund this? Not fund it, but who are they going to pay? So if I have a policeman that dies in line of duty, are they then, is the trust then going to pay my insurance carrier for that policy, those premiums for that year, for the continuing years? If I'm
Or are they going to create their own
Are they going to create their own, or what are they going to like?
What a nightmare. They can do like Cobra and we pay the premium and then they reimburse us.
So one of the things we've talked about, and it's good to have James, Commissioner Ebert, on this committee also, because he is a retired police officer. So he's got understanding kind of on the law enforcement side as well as on the fiscal side for the county. And when we met, he seemed very reasonable. In fact, he recommended that we maybe talk about doing some kind of a sunset provision, where either depending on years of service, the surviving spouse and dependents get so many years up to a certain point, and then they get cut off. Because there's no reason to not, help them along until they can get financially stabilized. That makes sense. So he brought some good things. He talked about doing a little 1 or 2 cent thing on car insurance. I don't know if you guys know about this, how this works. But I guess all of our homeowners insurance policies, we all pay a little bit for fire services. They're talking about maybe doing that with car insurance and having that cost spread out among all the residents in Utah instead of it hitting the agency that loses a life. So I mean, there are a lot of things out there, and I think it's good that we're looking at a lot of different things instead of just saying, oh, hey, by the way, this is it. I think they kind of just jumped the gun on this one. But no pun intended.
Well, and also recognize, so this bill, the House sponsor was Representative McKea. The Senate sponsor was Kurt Bramble. They already are aware that there's some problems. The trust fund issue, the timing of the trust fund. Also, the statute says that the way that it is right now, it says you will cover them for 24 months, regardless of your participation in the trust. If you have a line of duty debt, you'll cover them for the first 24 months. If you elected trust coverage, then the trust benefit would start at the beginning of the 25th month. So they've recognized there's some problems with it. There's some of the dates don't coincide. They have committed that this will be revisited again in the 2017 session. And so if you have ideas, your issue that you brought up or different things that we should be aware of, we'll be working with the bill sponsors and trying to maybe bring a different HR perspective about it as we revisit the legislation, and we'll hope to get some positive changes made for next year. But as it is right now, you have some decisions to make this year that will be impactful, but we will continue to visit. One of the things that they're looking at is alternative funding sources, because does it really make sense that for an agency to bear the burden? It's a public safety issue for all of our citizens, so for the agency itself to bear the burden of providing for that surviving spouse.
Well, you put Dallas in this situation, and they're looking at $500,000 for 5. Exactly. So they've got $2.5 million burden on their shoulders now. And again, I hate to focus on money, but that's how we can quantify things. So.
Right now, the obligation is there, but that is one of the things we'll be looking at next year is an alternative funding source to maybe look at insurances or some other way of funding the trust.
Yeah, because when they passed the bill in the first place in 2015, and then they ran it again in 2016 to make the changes, of course the state legislature, they had a big zero where it's a fiscal impact, because it doesn't cost them anything. It costs the agency the money to do that. And, is that right or wrong? I don't know. It's hard to say, right?
So how does that come back to your dollar thing? If you look at the agencies in Utah, you're going to have agencies such as Salt Lake County or Salt Lake City that will probably suffer more officer death over time than a small...
They have more potential to lose.
You would think so.
You would think so, but a lot of... Yeah, who is it? You got
Miller,
Miller,
Kane,
Kane, you went to Severe. That's it.
Retroactive perspective.
Yeah, they're all the outlying ones. So I would think that too.
See, and that it would also put a bigger stress on that smaller county, right, than it's going to put on a bigger county or bigger city.
It's just hard for us to think about absorbing $500,000. But again, that's over 30 years. But that's a long time to insure somebody that's not an employee. So, it's kind of a...
Give them a job and get your money out of it.
Get your money too. I understand that's what's happened with one of them. They employed the spouse, just had an opening and it just kind of worked out that they had that skill set.
Yes.
So take on the risk, wait and see if you have line of duty death. You can always just say, we're not going to participate in a trust, we'll take care of ourselves, which, those of us who have that prior don't have that option. We're doing that for those anyway. Transfer the risk, enroll in the trust, or you can eliminate the risk, but you can't really do that because it's eliminated. So, anyway, it's an interesting piece of legislation. We are going to be hearing more about it. Brandy and I are working closely with the committee to see how we can help to give them that perspective, the different perspectives. And so if you guys have any thoughts, any input, anything that you want to share, please feel free to email me, Facebook me. I need more Facebook friends, you guys. Thanks, Melissa. The other one's my mother. So, anyway, just know that there are some things that we're working on and we can do this. And I do also want to show you this. This is quite interesting to me. I went to a, come on, Dale, help me out, street survival class. And oh my gosh, it was the coolest class, and it was good for me to see what our law enforcement folks have to go through. Thankfully, not on a daily basis. It makes it feel like it because you watch all these scenarios. You've been on one of those classes. You see all those scenarios. And this is one of the things they did there. And it kind of brought it back to my mind to say, you know what, Joe? Yeah, we're talking about these guys, but they're real people, have real families. And so I wanted to share this with you. It's similar to what they do in their class. And it was really impactful for me. these folks do amazing work. They go in when we won't. So just remember that as you're considering some of these things. They're the first line for us. So, anyway, Dave, do we have any questions? Again, if you want to email me, Facebook me or whatever, or Brandy, we would be happy to bring your concerns and thoughts to the committee that's been working on that program. Thank you. I need friends. Please. Oh, yeah, and unrelated subject, we don't plan on killing anybody, but Corey and I are going to go for a hike after this class. So if you're interested in coming for a 5.5-ish mile hike, it's Peekaboo Loop. It's a really beautiful way to get kind of acquainted with the park with Bryce. It goes down through the wall windows and stuff. It's a really nice hike. So anyway, if you want to join me, come see me at a break and we'll get going. I have a pass, so I can fit 5 or 6 in my car, and if somebody else wants to come, we can do 2 vehicles, whatever. Thank you.
We're going for 1.3.